Hello, Felix Sutherland. How are you today?
We're here. We're excited.
Yay, we're excited here too. I was introduced to Felix by Kelly Campbell, which is a full circle moment for me. Kelly was my absolute first guest on the podcast. And Felix has been so great about our conversations, open to sharing about their journey, super thoughtful about describing their uniqueness, the challenges, the powerful aha moments, and really everything in between. I saw this on their website. Marginalized folks like us receive a lot of harmful messages. One's about not being able to take up space, that we're too weird, too different, too loud, that being ourselves is dangerous and our only hope of survival is being quote unquote more normal. Even if we manage to shift those beliefs, we're left fighting those internalized patterns every step of the way. And that from their website really spoke to my heart, and I feel like the heart of this podcast, which is creating space for these realities and these conversations and these stories to surface. Felix wants marginalized folks to know they're not alone. Felix is the queer coach for autistic and ADHD folks, helping high masking and late undiagnosed autistic and ADHD folks sort through the identity crises that come with understanding your brain for the first time in adulthood. They love nerding out about emotional processing tools that actually work for neurodivergent brains. And they're always looking for more ways to help people build more joyful relationships with themselves and others. Does that feel about right?
It feels about right. I like it.
Awesome. It is so good to have you here. Thank you for spending more time hanging out with me.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Excellent. What else might you want people to know about the work you do in the world?
Shout out to my coaching business, Joyful Divergence. I actually have one coaching spot open right now.
Only one.
Only one.
Oh.
Even if that one spot fills, they're shifting all the time. So they get on the wait list. But that's the bulk of my work. I have free co-working sessions that I also do once a week that anyone is welcome to show up to. And in the new year, I'm launching a group membership offer that helps you start to heal in community. So I don't have all the details of that settled yet, but this is a good time to get on the mailing lists, get all the plugs out of the way early.
Healing in community sounds like a wonderful thing right now.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it.
And what about personally interests that you have, something that lights you up that perhaps maybe people don't know about typically?
Ooh, so many things. I am ensconced in queer community in the greater Seattle area. I absolutely love playing roller derby, and I'm involved in STANCE, which is the Seattle Trans and Nonbinary Choral Ensemble, which is a whole group full of trans and nonbinary beautiful people like me. So we're busy. Yeah, I spend a lot of time at choir, at derby. I love a good cozy farming sim video game or fantasy or romance novel, as long as it's gay.
Tell me more about roller derby. I know what it is, but you show up for roller derby. What actually happens that day?
That's a great question. I help recreationally sort of training people from the ground up. A derby game itself is not the spooky, everyone's breaking an ankle left to right like you see in Whip It or in the 80s. It's more safe now than it used to be. There's a lot of rules to keep you safe. No throwing elbows anymore. You'll get ejected from the game.
What's the actual goal? How do you win?
Yeah, you have 5 people on the track. One person is the jammer, 5 people on each team. And the jammer's job is to get through the pack of people as many times as possible and stopping the other team's jammer from getting through the pack. So everyone else's job is to stop the opposing jammer from getting through the pack with controlled body contact.
That was the missing piece for me. It might have been a me thing, but that's super clarifying. Thank you.
Yeah. I think ultimately the goal in the 80s was make it shiny and beat up as many people as possible. So the goal has clarified over the years.
Okay. Sure, there was something to that too, but I'm glad it's evolved. Yeah. What are your pronouns?
My pronouns are they, them.
And what do you want the audience to know about your intersectionality, who you are, and you're navigating your career as an outsider story?
I am a white and fat person. Those aren't the identities that we'll focus on today. The identities that are more pertinent to this conversation are that I am queer and non-binary. I am also autistic. I don't know, self-employed an identity. I ended up leaving biotech to be self-employed, so that's an identity.
Absolutely. And it speaks to career, which is a big part of this discussion. So I'm about to ask you an impossible question. One of the things I've learned as I've been doing this podcast is how limiting language often is. So for example, the terms queer and non-binary while they clearly mean something and there's something in common for everyone in understanding them, I've found that individually that can translate very differently for people and their lived experiences. So would you be open to explaining how queer and non-binary apply to and feel for you?
Yeah, that's such a good question. It's a funny conversation that we have in the queer and in the trans and non-binary community, that my identity and how I describe it varies widely depending on who I'm talking to. So if I'm talking to a mixed audience, or if I'm talking to other folks who aren't trans or who aren't queer, then queer and non-binary. Like, that's the easiest explanation, but it's a huge umbrella. Before I came out as non-binary, I identified as bisexual. But when I came out as non-binary, I settled on queer as a label because the definition of bisexuality that I was applying to is attracted to both people who match my sex and people who don't. But if I'm coming out as non-binary, then the non-binary experience is that no one is my gender. Every person who is non-binary in a different way. So queer for me means I am attracted to people more than I am attracted to bodies. How my attraction looks to a person can depend on their gender expression and presentation, but I am attracted to people more than I am attracted to body. The non-binary identity, if I'm talking to people in my community, I would say that I am trans-masc. Not a trans man, but transitioning towards masculine and towards masculine energy, away from feminine energy. What's really interesting in the non-binary community is that can still mean any number of things. And it's fascinating to hear why people transition and what parts of transition they're excited about. I have people who their most excited is getting facial hair, and I have people who they're least excited about getting facial hair, but they really want their voice to drop. And then I have people who really don't want their voice to drop. For me, I knew when I came out that having a female chest was something that did not fit with my identity of myself, and that my voice octave didn't fit with my identity of myself. In my transition, my primary goal was to feel more androgynous in my body and have a lower voice than I had before. We did it. Hello, we're here. The bass and choir now. It's very exciting.
Excellent.
There's a little bit of gender fluidity in there as well. I feel slightly different in terms of my center of gender today than I will tomorrow. Yeah. It's confusing out here, y'all.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
No doubt. Back to words being limiting, right? Two words, and then look at the spectrum of how that unfolds for you. And I know we haven't even scratched the surface. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm sure I will feel differently about both my gender and my sexuality 5 years from now than I do today.
Thank you for the thoughtfulness of that explanation. And you started to speak about it, but I thought I would take us into the 2020-ish period for you, which, as I understand, although we've spoken a lot, we didn't get to these stories until we were chatting by email afterwards. So I'm really interested to hear them. I know you had two epiphanies about your identity around that time.
I talked about identifying as bisexual already. That happened in college. That was long ago. And when the world shut down in 2020 and a lot of things changed and we had a lot more time for reflection, for better or for worse, is when I discovered both that I was neurodivergent and also that I was non-binary. I was realizing the autism before the non-binary. That discovery started, I have a very clear memory of, I was driving back from a drive-in movie theater with my now wife, and we were talking about how she really likes to see movies in the movie theater, and I just don't enjoy the movie theater experience. I always walk out with a migraine. And I was like, this is a normal thing that happens to people. And she said, it really doesn't, actually. Most people are fine in the movie theater. I was like, that's interesting. And then I started reflecting how when everyone was wearing masks for the first time in my life, I suddenly could not understand what people were saying, and discovered in the reflecting on that and reflecting on movie theater that there was some sort of sensory processing thing happening. That the reason that I didn't like movie theaters was because they were auditorily overwhelming, that I would tense the whole time, and that's why I would end up with a migraine. And that I couldn't understand what people were saying because I had subconsciously been reading their lips the whole time to help me understand what they were saying. So if you put a mask over it, suddenly I can't process as easily. I'm not a perfect lip reader, but enough to help bridge the gap for my brain. So I sat with that for a couple of months. This was also the time when everyone was indoors. The millennial gravitation towards TikTok was happening. So a lot of people on TikTok were talking about their lived experiences, late diagnosed and undiagnosed neurodivergent people. And so I started hearing more of other people's stories of sensory processing or the autistic thing about eye contact, that I can make eye contact, but I hate it and it takes all of my focus energy. So I can't listen to what you're saying at the same time that I'm looking at you. All of these pieces started lining themselves up together and led me to the conclusion that it wasn't just a sensory processing disorder, but that I was on the autism spectrum. I didn't get a formal diagnosis until a couple years later. I don't think that a formal diagnosis is required to identify as autistic. So I'm going to say that for every neurodivergent person in the room right now, self-diagnosis is valid. In fact, there's not a lot of benefits to getting an autism diagnosis in adulthood because the resources for adults just don't exist.
Yeah.
And having that on your record could even be dangerous depending on your lived experience, depending on whether you're looking for asylum in another country. Some countries won't take. Autism counts as a disability. And if I report that I'm autistic at work, then it could help me get accommodations, but it could also be not helpful, the opposite of helpful.
Which we're probably going to talk about in a bit.
Yeah.
So as you realize this, before the official diagnosis, when you really knew you had knowing, was it a oof or an excitement? Okay, this all makes sense now. Or a little bit of both?
I think the answer is both and. I believe the first wave for me was relief that there are some things about myself, about how I grew up around struggling with friendships before I got to a high school that was full of other neurodivergent people, that felt like there was something wrong with me, and having the diagnosis for it made it feel less like it's something wrong with me and more like it is just a part of me. It's a neutral part of me. It's a very common experience. But there's also a very significant part of coming to terms with that diagnosis that I've seen over and over in my clients as well, that is grieving all of the ways that my life could have been different growing up if someone had.
Right.
I say it like it's two waves of the experience and then I was over it and I moved on. And that is definitely not the experience at all. It keeps coming up and keeps reprocessing. I think even now, 5 years later, I'm finding things that like, oh, that was because I was autistic and it would have been different if, or that was because I grew up in a neurodivergent family and no one knew they were neurodivergent. And so that's how we got to here. And that's healing that we have to do as a family. So it's a mixed bag. I felt, I think, more relief than I felt grief, especially because autism diagnosis in childhood is a problem for other reasons. I hear a lot from folks who have been diagnosed early that you might get more support, but support is often ableist and often alienating. And so I had that diagnosis early. I would have just had different problems growing up.
Different set of factors you were wrestling with. Yeah.
I hear more from ADHD people that the grief is stronger because there are medications and things that can help and more support tools. And there's less stigma around the ADHD diagnosis than around autism right now, at least. So there's, I think, one part relief, one part grief, one part existential panic because who am I and what do I do now about it?
That all makes sense. As you were alluding to, probably like your identity, fluid.
100%.
Yeah. Okay. And then around this same time-ish, you had clarity about being non-binary.
The precursor to that realization was that I had discovered coaching work, I had discovered cognitive thought work, and I'd been using that work to unpack my body image. I talked about how I am fat and have always been trending towards the plus size, and so there is a lot of diet culture that's stuck in the cracks from all angles. So I was doing a lot of that healing diet culture, getting to the point where I could see my body as good or as a work of art. And I had this clarifying moment. One of the practices is looking in the mirror at your body with no clothes on and appreciating your body, saying it is a work of art. And I looked in the mirror and my lizard brain went, okay, sure, my body's a work of art, but also those breasts aren't mine. And I was like, okay. That's new information. I thought that was just fat phobia in there, but it's not. There's something else in there.
Interesting.
I think that one was very much a light bulb moment. And I remember collapsing on my bed after that and bursting into tears and be like, okay, now my whole life has to change. What the fuck happened?
Wow.
And I was able to talk myself down from that moment of being like, just because I know this new thing about myself doesn't mean that anything has to change about my life.
Okay. Right.
I don't have to transition. I don't have to tell anybody. I don't even have to tell my wife if I don't want to. And I'm allowed to take this learning the new thing about myself and learning this new identity and taking this new identity on at my own pace, which is especially helpful because autistic brains are slow processors. Like,
Right.
I am processing everything in a network all at once. I feel like I have to know all of the things before I can take a step forward, which I think informed that emotional breakdown in the moment.
Yeah. So as you're collapsed on the bed upon getting this clarity, you're very quickly starting to talk yourself through in these ways and say, okay, it's okay, one step at a time.
Yeah. And I have been involved enough in the queer community. I have a family friend that I call my little brother who had come out as trans 10 years prior and knew enough about the transition journey and what the mainstream people know about the transition journey that I was picturing all these, okay, now I have to get surgery and now I have to start hormones and now I have to deal with body hair and now I have to change my pronouns and change my name and tell everyone I know and then help my in-laws figure out what it means to be non-binary and help my parents figure out what it means to be non-binary. All of this map was unfolding in my head and that's incredibly overwhelming. Yeah. I was able to talk myself back and be like, okay, right now, in this present moment, I know that I don't like my chest for gender reasons.
Yeah.
That's all I have to know right now. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow.
Good for you. Thank God you were able to access that in that moment because I can't imagine the overwhelm in general and also knowing what I know about autism because of how generously you've shared about it, that this web just started to web itself out in a million directions all at once and that you were able to center and just catch yourself. It was really cool. It's funny. I have this expression, clarity is kind. And as I'm speaking with you, I'm hearing it is on the one hand and on the other hand, it's
kind and also scary.
Also, yeah. So I'm going to have to think about my free use of that expression going forward. But as we're starting to pivot into discussions about your career, you're showing up as queer, non-binary, and autistic. And some of this is unfolding as you go throughout your career. So what are the ways that you found that your team and the people around you could and couldn't support you given your intersectionality?
It took me a couple months to come out as non-binary at work. I was working in my first biotech job that I had already been working at for a couple of years when I came out at work after coming out to everyone else that I knew. At the time, all I changed was my pronouns, and I tested the waters by coming out as she, they. I have one coworker in particular, I remember that when I told him that I was using she, they pronouns, he asked me if I had a preference between she or they. And it was the first time someone had asked me that question. I was like, oh, that's a good question. I don't know. And he said, okay, let me know if that changes.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. In the next couple of months after that, the more people started using they pronouns for me, I realized that I didn't actually like she in the first place. I didn't want to come out as fully they, them at that job, not because I felt unsafe. If I'm coming out as fully they, them, then it feels like an added social pressure to correct people every time, or that other people on my team will feel anxious about correcting people all the time. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing by any means, but it felt like a complicated part of the transition that I didn't want to do at that time. What I found using she, they pronouns is that most people didn't ask if I had a preference, and most people defaulted to she, unless they were actively also trans or non-binary in the community. I also had another person identifying as she, they at the office at the time, except that she was identifying as they, she, which is a really interesting language thing. They, she, putting the they first is usually a signifier for folks who are in the know that they is the pronoun that I prefer. She, they is a default. So if I'm intentionally reversing that, it feels like they is the priority and that she is there for, I don't want to fight people on it often. Yeah. But I think the most helpful thing that my coworkers did was that one coworker who asked if I had a preference and then was willing to change later when I discovered that I had a preference. The least helpful thing that my coworkers did when I came out as she, they was just keep referring to me as she unilaterally and not deal with it.
Yeah. You had left the door open, though, in a way. So technically not anything wrong. It was an opportunity for you to experience what it felt like to continue to be referred to as she. And to realize this doesn't feel
like,
so
actually,
good.
I hate this. Interesting information. Yeah,
Yes.
totally. I absolutely don't hold it against those coworkers for using she, but what I would highlight for potential allies is if you have someone in your life that is using she, they, if you're in a place where you can ask them which one they prefer, if that's the sort of relationship that you have, I would encourage it. And even if you're not in a place where you can ask, I would recommend at least trying to interchange them in your head. Use she sometimes, use they sometimes. So you're at least practicing the they, not just for that person, but for the next non-binary person that you meet.
And acknowledging that both exist for you, which is why the pronouns are there.
Maybe use both because both are there.
Wasn't there an interesting bit also about the name changed internally within systems?
Yeah. So I had not changed my name until a month ago, far after leaving Biotech. But in my time in Biotech, I was also very involved in the queer LGBTQ pride ERGs, whatever you want to call them. They have a different name in every company. So I was connected with all of the other queer and non-binary folks in the company. And it was our job to make sure that those people felt safe and felt accepted and do everything we can to make a better environment for those folks at the workplace. I was present in some capacity for the first trans or non-binary person that did the name change at work and had to get everything changed over to the new name at work. And both times, the IT team was wholly unprepared and did not know how to handle it. And Microsoft, which most workplaces use, is also terrible at handling it because Teams is weird and it'll update some places and not others, but then it'll update the other place a month later. It's a shit show. So I saw this experience for both people that they would talk to their HR representative and they would talk to the IT team and they would be on the surface level supportive, but then getting everything updated in the systems would take far longer than it should have and felt like everyone was anxious about it. And so they were avoiding it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to push heavily on this thing that I'm worried about. And we're just going to let technology do its thing. And then the trans person or the non-binary person would have to spend several weeks to months following up and being like, hey, this thing is still wrong. Please fix it. And then what I would also see on the personal side is even without that person in the room, so many people also being confused in the transition, which is natural. But there is an undercurrent of avoiding the person who is doing the shift or trying to avoid talking about them if at all possible because people were so scared of messing it up.
Yeah, which comes from, in some ways, a good place, which is I care, but then winds up manifesting as lack of action / apparent apathy, even if that's not the root of it. Does that feel right?
Yeah. I've seen even in the most extreme cases that person ends up being accidentally cut out of conversations or projects that are in their purview because people got screwed, which is not helpful for that person's sense of safety or for their work experience or their ability to contribute to the team.
So at the end of the day, this has a lot to do with charting uncharted territory, both for the person who's experiencing this transition as well as for the team that needs to support them all the way to an IT level and the inherent messiness of doing anything for the first time or among the first times that has ever been done.
Yeah, the advice that I kept coming back to, how can I be a better ally? The best advice that I kept coming back to is very similar to the advice that I hear given to white people trying to be allies in BIPOC spaces. The big downfall of the middle-class cis white person is that as part of a majority, we have not had to experience being uncomfortable and getting it wrong. And so when I do get it wrong, it feels like such a threat to my identity as a good person.
What is this thing that's happening? I've never felt
I
it
can't
before.
do anything wrong.
Right.
That means I'm a bad person. I can't be a bad person. I'm a good person. And then we like panic and we freak out and we over apologize or we run away or we avoid engaging as an ally because I'm terrified of getting it wrong. And what I would say to everyone in that situation, both my fellow white allies or accomplices and to cis people trying to be better allies for trans folks, is get comfortable with the idea that you're gonna fuck it up. And it doesn't mean that you're a bad person. It just means that you're trying your best, and this is complicated for everybody. I'm still fucking up my name sometimes. It's fine.
We started off, if I may, in the interview room beforehand, and I said to Felix, I have come a long way. I still mess up pronouns despite I have this podcast and I spend a lot of time in this space and it still pops out wrong and it's mortifying. And what you said is exactly what I need to hear, which is just get in there and do it and expect you're going to mess up from time to time. And then you can keep moving and learning and ask to make it right.
Yeah. I think the second half of that also that I want to highlight, just so we don't get into the bad ally space again, is that when I do fuck it up, the thing that people most often do is over apologize so that the victim feels like they're supposed to make you feel better.
Now I need to nurture
I'm so
you.
sorry, I didn't mean it. And I'm feeling now pressure to respond, oh, it's okay, it's not a problem, which it is a problem. And
Right.
I feel bad. And now I'm being asked to turn around and take care of you when I have been harmed. And that is very much centered out of I need reassurance that I am still a good person after messing it up, which is, I get it, a human thing. But I would recommend instead just a simple apology. I'm so sorry. Move on. If we need to come back to it later and do a deeper apology, maybe we can, depending on the situation. But process those feelings with someone else, not the person that we harmed.
That hasn't actually come up in previous conversations, to put the person who's harmed in the position now of having to be the consoler and the nurturer and do all of that extra heavy lifting is equally unfair in a different way.
100%.
Okay. We've had these situations that are arising for you as non-binary. You talked about the burden of labor. Could you talk about that in the neurodivergent autistic space?
The thread that I heard over and over again was, how do I accommodate the person who tells me that they're autistic or tells me that they have ADHD? Or as soon as someone tells me that they need an accommodation, I can go find that accommodation for them. And that's also the thread that has been most common in neurodivergent spaces, is that the best thing that you can do is tell your work that you need an accommodation, as long as you trust your work to not do some awful things with that information. But it puts the burden on the marginalized person to out myself at work, for work has proven that it is safe to out myself.
Right.
If no one else has come out as high masking autistic or has asked for ADHD accommodations before, then we get into that same place of I go to HR and they have no idea how to handle it. I tried asking for noise canceling headphones at my second biotech company, and the HR rep came back requiring a diagnosis or a letter from my doctor to get me an accommodation.
Wow.
And I was like, it's headphones. What do you mean?
Right.
And I don't really want this on paper that succinctly. That feels unsafe. It feels more even unsafe now with the current administration than it did at the time. I would not put my autism diagnosis on paper at a company now.
And what position would that put you in? Where would that leave you on a day-to-day basis? I don't feel safe. I'm not going to disclose. And here's my reality as a result.
Yeah, depending on who your manager is, the only option that leaves you with is continuing to mask and try to be neurotypical, which is exhausting. I was lucky enough to have a manager that I could trust with that information. And so we had a couple of very frank conversations and one-on-ones of like, this is how you can support me. And these are limitations in how this is going to show up on the team. I'm probably going to make a misstep in a social cue in a meeting at some point. I promise it's not intentional. I promise I'm not trying to be rude. It's just that I missed the social cue, and let me know and I can work on repairing it. But what I've seen happen more often for people, because that situation is very rare and there's a lot of anxiety and scarcity wrapped up in this job, because if I lose it, what does that mean for my stability and my safety? That a lot of people end up just trying to mask, trying to appear as neurotypical as possible, just not asking for accommodations because it is unsafe. And then we end up with every neurodivergent person in the workplace is constantly burnt out. They're very often overcompensating, in the autism space at least, overcompensating for my social mishaps by being an overachiever in my work. And then I'm suddenly working 60 hours a week.
And so it's almost a double whammy, if I'm understanding correctly, which is your brain is on overdrive in order to try to process information that's not being shared with you in a way that works.
Yeah.
You're masking. It's actually a triple whammy. You're masking, which is exhausting. And then you're putting in extra time and effort on top of it to compensate for what you,
I've seen perfectionism be an almost universal problem for my clients. I have to be perfect at my job so that they can't afford to fire me.
Right. Very unfortunate and interesting. Brings us to this biotech layoff
Oh boy.
situation that you experienced. And I know a lot of your experience was rooted in that initial thought about perfection equals security. This is how you've been navigating the world. And then all of a sudden,
it wasn't safe anymore. Yeah, I had lessons from early on that science was the safe career, that I would have all the money and the stability, and that as long as I was a scientist, I would be good. And I was solid at my job. So we had a round of layoffs that was announced. I was working a shifted schedule, so it was announced on a Monday when I was at home, which was a very stressful. 3 different coworkers texted me at the same time and was like, check your email. I don't care that it's your day off. You need to know what's happening. And it was just the worst way that a company could have handled layoffs, where they did not ask managers for input on who was actually vital to the team. They just made unilateral decisions, gave the managers maybe 12 hours warning before they had to start telling people, and those people had to be out of the building. I was like, I am very good at my job and I've been here for 2.5 years. There are so many people that are new hires, and usually it's last in, first out. So I'm worried about the new hire that I just trained, but I'm solid, I'm safe. And then my manager asked to call me, and I got on this video call with her on my couch. She told me that I was laid off and that I could either come in today to drop off stuff or come in tomorrow to drop off stuff. And I remember getting off that call and bursting into tears, sobbed heavy, body-wrenching sobs for a solid half hour. Because that was the first time, I think, in my career that I had gotten proof that this career is not safe and that I can be perfect at my job and still lose it. And that's scary. I had already done a lot of thought work by that time, finding a sense of safety outside of work, finding my sense of safety within myself, and trusting my ability to bounce back from the worst case scenario. So I was a lot better off than pretty much anyone else who got laid off in my cohort. This was the moment of, if safety is what I am looking for, then this career isn't going to give that to me anyway. And we've seen that over and over again since then. There's been round after round of layoffs, which ended up, at least for me, being freeing. And it's the best thing to ever happen to me. Those 3 months after the layoff, when I was looking for new work, gave me the space to think about coaching, which had already been in the back of my brain. I had gone to a coaching retreat, and by the end of the retreat, people were telling me that you should do this for a living. You really love this shit. And I was like, okay, I'll keep that in the back of my brain and probably never act on it. And then I had this freedom to be outside of biotech, and I was like, I, real talk, don't want to go back. I don't really care about this career. I fell into it because I was 2/3 of the way through a chemistry degree when I realized I didn't want to be a vet anymore. I was like, may as well continue the chemistry degree and see where it takes me. And then I mentioned that I was thinking about starting a coaching business to my physical therapist, who had also started her own business and was also neurodivergent. And she texted me less than 24 hours later and said, I have a client for you. What's your pitch?
Wow.
Oh, God. Okay, we're doing this now.
All right, universe. Thank you. Yeah.
Fine. Universe handed to me on a silver platter. I buckle up. And the rest is history. So I got the second job in biotech while I was still building up the coaching business. But the shift that happened in my brain with the layoff that made all of that possible is that if I am trusting my career to be safe, I'm going to end up upset because no career is 100% safe. So if safety isn't something that is easy to achieve, then I may as well chase growth and chase passion instead.
Yes. And probably took the edge off of the perfectionism, since that didn't ensure anything anyway. Is that right? Yeah.
100%. That also showed up at my second biotech job when I got hired on. It was like, I was perfect at this last job and worked 110% of the time and was always exhausted because I was working all day, every day with no breaks, and saw that happen with a bunch of my coworkers as well, who would like skip lunch breaks, and I had to yell at them to stop and eat. And I still got laid off. So this job, we're going to not do that. And I'm going to actually take a lunch break, and I'm going to chill on a Friday afternoon rather than taking another experiment at the last minute.
And I'm guessing that in letting go of that perfectionism and giving yourself some space and grace, you probably were more successful, more able to do the job, more fulfilled, even though it wasn't your ultimate job.
When I wasn't trying to be perfect, I was still very good because I had spent so long trying to be perfect. And it freed up my brain to actually be able to connect with people, to actually find space for the ERG work that was really valuable to me, that was aligned with my values. And it freed up space to be more creative and take on the projects that I actually excelled at, rather than feeling like I had to do all of the grunt work just because no one else wanted to do it.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. So I have started a new segment this season called the Thrive Takeaway. If listeners remember only one thing from our conversation today, one thought, one piece of advice, what would you want them to carry with them so that they can thrive in their own careers?
The first thought that popped into my head was from the perspective of talking to allies. As an ally, no matter what identity you hold, you are an ally for another identity. I am the oppressed in terms of being queer, but I am the ally in terms of BIPOC issues thing.
Yes.
As an ally, especially, get comfortable being uncomfortable and work through your moral judgment of yourself outside of the person that you may very likely do harm to in some capacity. Because the more uncomfortable I can be, the easier it is for me to show up in activism spaces and actually be helpful rather than be terrified in a corner. As the person trying to thrive in my career as a marginalized person, the thing that has been most helpful for my journey has been all of the thought work tools and all of the therapy and all of the coaching that I've gotten around external circumstances won't make me safe. I have to find that safety inside of myself. I can't trust that this job's going to hang around forever. No job will hang around forever.
Absolutely.
Especially in the 21st century. But I can trust that no matter what happens, I will be able to figure it out. Or I have more of a safety net than I give myself credit for. I have parents who can help me make ends meet. I have a community that can back me up. And I trust myself to be able to find the next thing. Trust myself to be able to grow and find safety.
That's amazing. And that, I imagine, is initially a leap, but if you continue to do the work, it's almost like you said, you need to get a little uncomfortable in order to get comfortable with that as well, right?
Yeah, honestly, a bulk of the work that I do now is as folks are coming to terms with diagnosis in adulthood or self-diagnosis in adulthood or trying to unpack perfectionism. All of these emotional processing or habit shifting comes down to all of it gets easier when I can trust that no matter what, I am safe. I can find safety. I am worthy. I belong. I am enough.
If you're okay here, then whatever's going on out there is just out there.
Yeah, the whole world can be burning. And I'm like, okay, but I'm good.
But I'm good.
Listen, some terrible things are happening to trans people around the country right now. But in my circle, I am safe.
That's so important. Thank you. So that's today's Thrive Takeaway. And if you're listening and it got you thinking, I invite you to explore your own paths to thriving in your career and beyond. My free Thriving assessment offers a gentle but powerful way to get clarity on where you're excelling and where you can increase joy, fulfillment, and impact. It takes just minutes and gives you instant personalized results. You'll find it at shantijoygold.com in the upper right-hand corner. So now we will pivot to a segment that's been with me from the very beginning, which is called It's My Podcast, so there will be music. I believe that music, like storytelling, really hits a deeper chord. And if there were one song you could put in a time capsule and preserve at all costs for future generations, what would it be and why?
The song that I settled on, especially for the conversation we had today around the experience of being non-binary and autistic, is a song called Alien Party by Sid Dory, who is a non-binary person. And the song is all about, I live in life as a non-binary person feels like an alien party. So it's really tasty for the experience that non-binary people are having right now, where we can come out in a way that we couldn't 100 years ago, but we're still in this weird space of, okay, I've come out, but now I'm not, I feel weird. I feel like I am an alien and in a planet of aliens.
I heard that song for the first time and it's great. It's a deep theme, but it's upbeat, poppy.
It's a banger.
It's a banger. It's a banger. Yeah, I got a couple lines here. Don't know how this species works here on Earth and why everyone's got to be a him or her, but I'm just not. And that's a lot for humans who were born saying ma'am and sir. Living here feels like an alien party. Yeah,
I feel like that the deep theme, but also just a bop, is the duality of a lot of queer experiences. Hey, there's a lot of struggle, but in the struggle of being marginalized, we also find a lot of beauty and a lot of community and a lot of deep sources of joy and euphoria.
Yeah, hard fought, hard won, and deep relationships and perspectives. Excellent. So as we're coming to the end of the podcast, tell us more about what you're up to in the world and where people can find you.
These days have left biotech entirely as of
nothing wrong with biotech, but just for you.
For me, wasn't where I actually wanted to be in the long run. I'm much more passionate about my work now. Shout out to everyone who actually loves biotech. It's not a bad field. I did enjoy a lot of it. But I am now working full-time as a coach for high-masking autistic and ADHD folks. My business is called Joyful Divergence. It's a name that I'm very proud of.
Love it.
And I've worked a lot with one-to-one coaching, which is all pay what you can scale, which is a novel offering for a lot of folks. I also offer free co-working. That body doubling energy is the most helpful thing for any neurodivergent brain ever. I'll take that back. Not any neurodivergent brain. Neurodivergent's a big umbrella. I can't speak for other diagnoses, but for ADHD and autistic brains at least. Free co-working is amazing. I host that once weekly, and we're growing towards group healing programs and memberships in the new year. So get on my mailing list for more details about all of that.
Okay. We'll make sure people have the links to do all of that so they can find you easily. And we're also very excited to add Alien Party to the Spotify playlist that we have. Yeah.
That's good.
We started chatting a little while ago, and as with every single conversation we've had, you're so thoughtful. You are amazing at expressing very complex, nuanced thoughts, realities, and you just show up so fully, and I appreciate that tremendously. It's been a pleasure once again to just hang out and spend time with you.
I'm happy to be here.
Thank you.
My work has also been accepting compliments. Give me that juicy stuff.
Look at you. Yeah.
Great.
They're pulling it in. I'm so glad. So thank you again for being here. All right, everyone. That brings this episode of Stories We Haven't Shared to a close. I believe stories are our humanity waiting to be shared, and listening makes it possible. Thanks so much for being here today by our virtual campfire. Until next time, and thank you again so much to Felix Sutherland. Take care.
Hey, happy being here. Bye.
Bye.